Hi, welcome back to Science 1206, the Chemical Reactions Unit. I'm Ms. Ledwell, and in this video, we'll discuss the properties of ionic compounds. So let's begin. Let's start with a review of the classification of elements and compounds. Pure substances can be further divided into elements and compounds. Elements can be further subdivided into atomic elements and diatomic and polyatomic elements. Compounds can be divided up into ionic and molecular compounds, and in this video, we will focus on ionic compounds. Recall that a compound is a pure substance made up of two or more different elements joined together by chemical bonds in a fixed ratio. Two categories that chemists use for classifying compounds are first ionic. For example, salt, NaCl, is an example of an ionic compound, and magnesium chloride, MgCl2, is another example of an ionic compound. And the second category is molecular, also known as covalent. In grade 9 science, you may have referred to molecular compounds as covalent compounds because the type of bonds that hold these together are known as covalent bonds. In this course, we will refer to them as molecular compounds and the bonds as covalent bonds. Some examples of molecular compounds are carbon dioxide gas, CO2, and water, H2O. Chemical compounds in these two categories, ionic and molecular, exhibit common properties and characteristics. Ionic compounds and their properties will be further discussed in this lesson. Let's look at some properties of ionic compounds. Ionic compounds exhibit the following characteristics. They are composed of a metal, the first element in the formula, and a nonmetal, the second element in the formula. They are formed through a transfer of electrons, and during the formation of ionic compound, an atom of one element loses electrons while an atom of another element gains those electrons. So, for example, when lithium fluoride forms, lithium loses an electron to fluorine. Therefore, fluorine gains an electron, and a transfer of electrons takes place. Notice that lithium fluoride starts with a metal, the first element, lithium, and the second element is a nonmetal, fluorine. Recall that the left side of the periodic table contains the metals, with the exception of hydrogen, which is classified as a nonmetal. And remember that the nonmetals are located on the right side of the staircase on the periodic table, except for the nonmetal hydrogen, which is located on the right-hand side. Bromine, oxygen, and carbon represented in this image are some examples of nonmetals that we find on the periodic table. Next, let's look at some examples of ionic compounds. Some examples of ionic compounds include magnesium oxide, MgO, sodium chloride, NaCl, magnesium sulfide, MgS, calcium oxide, CaO, and potassium chloride, KCl. In each of these compounds, the first element listed is a metal, and the second one is a nonmetal. Next, let's look at some properties of ionic compounds. Ionic compounds are composed of ions that join together to form an ionic crystal lattice structure, which is held together by the electrostatic attraction between the cations, which are positively charged ions, and anions, which are negatively charged ions. They are solids at room temperature. For example, table salt, NaCl, is an ionic compound that is a solid at room temperature. They have high melting and boiling points. For example, the ionic compound sodium chloride, or table salt, has a melting point of 801 degrees Celsius. And they will conduct electricity when melted or dissolved in water. Next, we're going to watch a video called Dogs Teaching Chemistry, which is embedded in a Google form located under the Activities section in Brightspace. This will help you learn more about chemical compounds. Once you have watched the video Dogs Teach Chemistry and completed the Google form, please continue on to the next instructional video.